That's okay.
No, that's fine. Just like that. Okay, this is May 12th, 1988. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Jerry Jarrett in Kansas City, Missouri. And where do you live?
I live in Arlington Heights.
Arlington Heights, Illinois?
Illinois, yes, sir.
And what's your address there?
500 West Rand Road.
Grand Road?
R-A-N-D.
R-A-N-D. Okay. Where were you born?
The actual city would be Brooklyn. Right near the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
And when's your birthday?
February the 8th, 1900.
Okay. Did you go through school there in Brooklyn?
No, I did go to school. I wouldn't remember the school. Whenever the rent came due, we had to move to someplace else. But I stayed with Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I bought a ship.
When the rent came due, you had to move.
Huh?
When the rent came due, you had to move.
Most of the time, we were poor, a family of 8 and nobody working. When I came out of the Navy, it was worse yet. I thought that the uniform would help me. Instead, it didn't in those days.
What kind of work did your father do?
How's that?
What type of work did your father do?
My father?
Mm-hmm.
My father died when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And my mother raised the rest of the family.
Mm-hmm.
I myself was a salesman. I guess I did all manner of work that I could find. And it seemed I found my niche in selling. I guess everybody sells in one way or another, whether it's serving the people or selling merchandise. But that seemed to be my mainstay, was selling.
Mm-hmm. Why did you join the Navy?
Well, for the first reason, it wasn't too patriotic. Later it became so that I was glad I did. I was 17 years of age, and that the war was going on, and the Navy offered enlistments for duration of the war. In other words, if the war lasted 20 years, I'd have to say 20. It lasted 2 years, and that's how long I stayed. But the Navy was the making of me, because I went in as a sickly kid. I came out strong and hardy, and people never recognized me when I came out. Actually, as I mentioned in one of my letters, that I was a coward and afraid to commit suicide because I had a nervous sickness. And, you know, kids can be awful cruel to one another. And they spit at me and did things, and I figured, what's the use of living? But I was afraid to die. It's like the Old Man River, feared of dying. So I figured, well, first strong winter comes along, why, it'll blow me off. But when I went to volunteer, they told me that I wanted to join the cavalry. I thought kids like to ride horses, and they told me at that time that the cavalry was out. But how about the army? Well, the army, I figured, I was always hungry, and if I got hungry in the army, we'd have to move on where the Navy would go to a different port. Luckily, the Oklahoma was being commissioned at that time, 16, and this was going to be her maiden voyage. In boot camp, which was Norfolk, Rhode Island, not Norfolk, not Rhode Island, but not Rhode Island News, but not Newport News, but let me see what. There was Newport,
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. that's where I boot camp. And they were selecting men. And when I asked the various men what the difference was between all the ships, well, they said this one and this one are all coal ships, excepting the Oklahoma, which is the newest ship there, and it looked wonderful. So this is the ship that I wanted to go on very badly.
So you requested the Oklahoma. Did you request the Oklahoma?
Well, I requested in a sort of a different way. I watched how they selected the men for each school. The men that they selected were spry and young, and I figured when like a bunch of stud horses, they all traded in front of the men that were selected for that crew. So I put on my best walking very vigorously, and then on I became a sailor. And my brother came aboard ship, and I'm ahead of myself. In order to get on at 17 years age, they wouldn't accept me if I told them I was 16 or 17, unless I had a signed order from my mother. And at the head of the letter it says, age certificate. Now that she could read, she could hardly read, and would sign a name laboriously. So I says, Mom, I got a job at $12 a week, which was big money in those days. So I said, but they want your signature that I'm 17 years old, though I wasn't quite 17 at the time. And so all you got to do is sign it. So she started working slowly and slowly, and she said, oh, wait till your big sister comes home. I didn't want to act too hasty or give sign of suspicious, so I looked out the window. I said, here comes Sid. That was my oldest brother. I said, you know how he and I fight over the tie that he's wearing. She said, quick, get out of here before he comes in. I said, oh, I have to sign that paper and I'll get out. She signed it. I ran out the hall. I don't know what possessed me. And I put the paper underneath the rug. When I came back, instinct of a mother, she said, she fell on the floor. I said, oh, son, help me. My poor mother lying there on the floor. Whether he's fooling or not, I suspected something. I figured she couldn't hurt me. But as I went down to pick her up, she grabbed my arm like a vice. You never saw such a strong woman in your life. She searched me, but it was gone. I had the common sense to put it in the hole under the rug. When my brother came aboard ship to explain to the admiral under what circumstances I went aboard, he finally, after much talking back and forth, said, oh, I'll tell you what, if he'll go back home with you, I'll let you take him along with you. Well, my pride wouldn't let me up at that point. I would like to have a bunk again instead of a hammock to sleep in, which I got a taste of. And so I said, no, I'd like to stay in. So my brother said to the admiral, well, if they hire a man like that, I feel sorry for my country. And they almost threw him in the brig for that reason. And so I became, and this has been a thing for the family as a joke for many years to follow. They said a man from this family has joined the armed forces. The reason I left a man. Here I was a sickly kid in a cradle to bed. I got out of the sick bed and joined the Navy. Here they called me a man. That was a big joke there. Well, I came out of the Navy strong and healthy as the only one fit to head the parade of a tall and strong boy, from being the most sickly to the best man. That was me, and that.
Yeah. So you said that you led the parade down Broadway?
Yes, the homecoming parade. Yes, sir. My sister was waiting for me on the sideline. This is the fun. It's funny, but it's all true. My sister was waiting to pick me out because she said he visited me once or twice. He'll be the strongest, the biggest man there. But that's what all they picked was the big and strong man to make a good impression under the parade. She had a hard job finding. Well, she finally inspired me. My sister was a great one for dramatics. She picked me out and she went right into the crowd and took me out and kissed me and ran back. And the guy alongside of me says, "Who's the dame?" And so I said, "My sister." "Oh yeah, your sister." She was pretty, you know, and sailor just coming home, everybody looked pretty to them. So that was my homecoming.
Tell me about boot camp.
About who?
About boot camp.
About boot camp? Well, as I say, I didn't fare too well. I was hungry most of the time. And the first part happened when it was my turn to serve mess. Everybody had to take their turn. One fellow gave me $5 to take his turn. Well, after I served and ate all I could, we put the tables up to the bulkhead in those days, folded it under and put it up to the bulkhead. But about 2 hours later, I was just as hungry as I was before, but I had already put bread and onions and stuff up there. When I got hungry, I could eat again. When it came time again, if they didn't pay me $5, I would have paid them $5 to let me continue serving mess. That's another episode. I had pimples on my face, inches thick. The ugliest duckling you ever saw in your life. When I come up, even the men in the ship died. The standard joke, he said, when I was this sick, he said, "Jerry, I don't want you to die." This was a joke he was playing. I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, if you die, I'll be the ugliest man left." See, so, but my face cleared up. What it did for me, one will never know. I don't remember the lieutenant that was in charge of me, but he actually was more like a father than a lieutenant. But he was very sincere. And in one of the letters that I showed it to this fellow, he reminded that the man's name come from this fellow from Cape Cod. He named the fellow, and I often wished I could get in touch with his family, who probably is living today, and let them know how much their son, who most likely be dead by now because he was an elderly man, not elderly man, but older than the average seaman. But I remember one day climbing up the ship's ladder, as they call it, and he looked back and he said, "How come, Jerry, that haven't balled you out today yet?" See, that's how close. And when it comes to sharpshooting of the cannon, they had target practice. He asked him to put me on the gun crew, and that's the time when we put the powder in for the fun, and then my job was to call when the ball was clear, because if they left any fire in the gun, the next bag of powder coming was blown up. So I had to decide that the ball clear was a ball clear, then you'd go ahead with it. It seemed that I had a better eye than I thought I did, because they claimed that one or two ones I aimed went through a shot that had been fired before, which was almost a bullseye. What that could be just a Navy story, I don't know, because every man was fighting for his own ship. And if I may recite another incident, it was time for me to have battle stations. Some of the things I was stationed in Bantry Bay Island, and what we did was escort the ships troop ships going out. We escorted President Wilson to the League of Nations at that time. Was hired. Now, when we returned from one of those trips, they didn't let us go back to the net again, because somebody had gone there and mined it, so that when we went back behind the magnetic net again, we would have been blown up. So they saved us our lives. How they found out it had been bombed, I'll never know.
Now, where was this? Where'd that happen?
Bantry Bay Island.
Okay.
That's where we stayed until the troop ships came and we escorted them to where they were going. And also the ship that President Wilson was on at the time, we escorted him to the League of Nations. He was the man that started the League of Nations.
Why were there mines in Ireland?
Well, they didn't mine it. The enemy mined it.
The Germans did.
So that when we got back, we would be blown up. And so, and when we went out to sea on maneuvers, the entire fleet, well, if we saw something out so many points off the starboard beam or something, they would say, "What does it look like?" How to compare it to something in the water? It looks like a gun. It looks like this, that, the other. Seaweed would come up from a submarine, or so I reported something that looked like a periscope, and before I could say where it was, the whole fleet zigzagged, started firing at this assumedly periscope, and kept on going because they didn't want to be a sitting target. As they looked back, there was that periscope still. Not one of them hit it from the entire fleet. Not some, but they sent back a little dingy to check on it, and what it was a table with the 3 legs shut off and 1 leg standing up, and that was the periscope. That's one of the fun parts of that. Now, for the longest time, I thought this is a figment of my imagination. I couldn't make sure whether all this was true, but this fellow Penny from Cape Cod, he said, "Jerry, do you remember in London?" He says, "We had the baseball team, and we were taken over by the royalty, the ladies." Today I would say, "Oh, lady so-and-so," I'd be proud, but as a kid, they wasn't important to me. What was important to me, that they gave us chocolate and gave us some place to sleep, and even he told me where they was to, so, and he's the man that set all my thoughts that I had before right, that I didn't believe my own thoughts, verified it for me. So, if I'm going too long, okay. So, that was one of the 5 parts. But I say, I guess you could call that what was it? The ugly duckling turned to be a beautiful swan. My pimples were gone. I had a smooth head of hair, which I still have some of it left, and everything was lovely, excepting when I got out, and I thought I'd be covered with glory. There was bonuses supposed to be given. I never got it, and I think I told you downstairs that now I suspect why I didn't get it, because my name and you saw my discharge papers, was Morris Herman Jarret, but everybody knew me as Jerry, even in school. So I changed it legally to Jerry Jarrett, but all the names on my important papers, according is Morris Herman Jarret. And like I say, there's so many things that I love that ship like a floating palace. It was home to me. It was my most important thing. There never was a ship as beautiful as that Oklahoma. Really not.
Would you describe your quarters on the Oklahoma?
Well, of course we didn't have any bunks in those days. It was hammocks, and they had some ensigns coming on to teach us how to get them, but they didn't know any more than we did. But later on, they made wonderful officers. But when we first come in, they was just as low as we are. In order to get into your hammock, I found, first of all, it must be real taut. Otherwise, if it got a belly in it, it would hurt your back. Now, if you ever try to get into a hammock that's real tight, it would turn over and over. In order to get into your hammock, I had to go up and chin up, put my feet in first, and then back. Now, the flu was rampant in those days, and there was 1,500 men aboard ship, and the biggest part of them were up aboard deck because they wanted to get the air. 500 of those 15 men died. As a kid, that's why young people, I guess, make good soldiers, sailors. Nothing fazed them. They're too ignorant of fear to be afraid. And they rush in where angels fear to tread. But all this comes back as happy memories.
See, 500 men on the Oklahoma died of the flu?
Flu. Now, when I was up in the watch, I up until this day, I'm not sure which was the high command. To me, I thought was the captain, but evidently there's a commander aboard ship. I forget some of the terms that today they use. And this commander told us he has seen his family, hasn't seen his family in over 20 years. Because the ship wasn't, but he'd come from some other ships. And I couldn't understand how anybody could live. That's how much I loved my family, not seeing his own family, because we realize today that's so with a lot of people. But when he said that, he was one of the men that got the flu. And this fellow that, I think his name was Kennedy, and in that book his name is mentioned, and how I would love to get in touch with his family.
Did you have burials at sea of the men that died of the flu?
You know, I'll have to plead ignorance. I saw things happen like that on that one slide outside, but I thought it was another maneuver. Like I was a sailor, I should be able to swim. No, because they didn't have time to teach us, and we had a sea anchor. I don't know if you know what a sea anchor is. That's where you can't put anchor in the middle of the sea. But they floated the ship so that it wouldn't drift. In some way they kept like a standstill platform. And those that wouldn't jump in was pushed over with lifesavers on. But the waves are so high that all the swimming in the world couldn't go against the tide. We had to be fished out. That's one of the things. But to this day, I never learned how to swim because that put it. What I did do is I was a boxer, so I thought I have all the earmarks of a fighter that could fight for 20 years. I got in one day. I got a cut over my eye. I got a cauliflower ear. All this in one night. My career ended in a couple of days. But I got all the badges of a boxer.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about going on Liberty in England. Did you go on Liberty in England or Ireland?
Yes, and we went in London. But before we went to London, the natives in Ireland, most wonderful people you ever met in your life, and it was strange to me that they wanted white bread. Their white bread was wonderful, black bread. And so I used to bring them white bread, and in turn they would bake eggs for me that you never tasted in their life. It's different. Right on a rock, they would ham and eggs and anything. Until one day they chased me to find out who was giving them white bread, and the natives wouldn't let them take me. That's how much they thought of me, and I always think of them lovingly for that. And I still drink Irish whiskey. But that was one. Now the next, my time over in London, I don't know if I should tell this or not. Anyway, we were entertained by royalty, as I mentioned before. The ladies come over with chocolate, and we were told by the officers, when these men come aboard ship, I want you to treat them very civilly. We had several skirmishes with them in the theater, but they were really wonderful to us, and exchanged nations. At that time, baseball wasn't known to them in those days, and they said, "Blimey," they said, if I let them throw the ball at me that way. And I said, well, it's the same as your game of cricket. You have your ball on the ground. We have ours up there. We're on, we exchange enemies. And I hope this is not being taken on tape, but I'll have to stop right there.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Huh? This is very bad. Okay. So they said, I hear you boys have been having, it was all over with then they said, I hear you boys are having quite a go of it with our gals over there. Hey, what? Well, I thought I knew what they meant, but to be sure, I said, no, we're being received very nicely. Oh, we said, no, I don't mean that. I said, what I mean, you're doing quite a bit of fucking. That's why I didn't want that to go on tape.
Okay.
That, you know, I can think of things, old songs. I can recite "The Face on the Barroom Floor." That takes about 20 minutes, and something that happened 10 minutes ago, I forget. If I say I got to do this, the next thing I got to do is such and such. I never get to the second thing. Yet I can recite poems in different language that I don't even understand just by memory.
What's your fondest memory of the Oklahoma?
The fondest memory of the Oklahoma was one great big love for it. That's a funny thing to say. It was like a floating palace. There was a man that took my part by being very strict with me, like a loving father, and if I had the same sense I had now, I would never have left her.
When you okay?
I'm a crybaby. I have to laugh at myself. No, I do. That was my love for the ship. I just don't know how to explain it. It was my whole life. It was the part that a young child takes into himself, and that's what he's building on. And there was my home. There's plenty of eat and the love, and without being coddled, what came from that ship. And she was as clean as you ever would want it. She bristled, and she fought bravely. Every man protected each other. There was no bias amongst them. It was a ship really in every respect to be proud of, and I'll never forget it.
I have another question I have to ask. Whenever you heard the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor and the Oklahoma had sunk, what was your reaction?
Well, I was in St. Louis at the time, and it came over television. My wife says, there's something on the Oklahoma, about the Oklahoma. And it took a while for me to sink in. I couldn't understand it, because I understood the Japanese embassies came and were talking with the president at that time. And while the talk was going on, that's when they hit the ship. Well, I know if you must have read the poem, She Was Too Young to Die. Well, that expresses my feelings entirely. He put it very well. She was too young to die in so many ways. When one of your children or your parent dies, I express myself as a child and a protector of the family of the Oklahoma. They took that all away from you. How would you feel if your family and your home was all went at one time? How can you express how you felt? There's no way to express those things. And I hope you forget those tears, but please.
Any incidents happened while you were escorting President Wilson?
How's that?
Anything happened on the ship while you were escorting President Wilson?
No, excepting when we returned, but when the place we were, instead of going back on behind the net after escorting them, we found out that they wouldn't let us go back. But he was really starting what we have now of the world figure. But he, in reading about politics at that time, which of course you wasn't around, but the politics was that they elected him, that the powers that does the electing, because he was a man that they could maneuver, but they found out different, that he wasn't maneuverable as they thought. He had a high hat on, and he was like Harry Truman. He fought in the same war that we did, World War One, and everybody said he could never win, but he did, and one of the finest presidents we ever had.
When did you go on board the Oklahoma?
When I went.
When did you go on board the Oklahoma?
From boot camp when they selected me. In other words, I was then when it was time to come. I went aboard at the Brooklyn Navy, but I was selected at Newport, Rhode Island.
What was the date when you went on board? Yeah.
I wonder who would know. I have no brothers, no sisters, no the last one.
Were you on board when it was commissioned?
Oh yes, I was on the maiden voyage. Of course, you went right out from there, right out to Bedford. This lieutenant that I've been talking about, which I'll give you the name later. His intentions were, as he explained to us, he wanted to be known as the veterans of foreign wars, and he was the one that went aboard. He was the one that steered us right into the foreign waters.
Would you describe the commissioning ceremony on the Oklahoma?
What?
The commissioning ceremony when the Oklahoma was commissioned.
No, I try to recall that. I don't think I could give you a truthful answer on that. That's not vivid in my mind for some reason or other. There was one other thing that I was wanted to tell you, but it slipped my mind in totality. That was, oh yeah, when I came, mother's love for a child. When I came home, there was a neighborhood to greet me. I was still in the Navy on leave before I went aboard, and everybody was hushed quiet. And when the time to go, everybody left because they knew it would be very strenuous thing to see. So my mother said to me, she said, "You have so many men in the Navy, they wouldn't miss one man if you didn't go back."
What were your main duties on board the ship?
I was an expert second class deck rats.
You holy stone the deck?
Huh?
Did you holy stone the deck?
Yes, yes, sir. And they had coffee without sugar. The best coffee, as I recall, according to the other men, they come in a big pots early in the morning while we were stoning the deck. And I felt like, now that you mentioned, I felt like stoning them because if they only used sugar or cream, just a little sugar. I didn't ask much of life, just a little bit of sugar.